It's funny. During Alabama's 15-year dynasty, I only thought maybe one of their teams was one of the best I'd ever seen. I thought it was the greatest overall dynasty, but I didn't think they had some of the best teams. I think the best SEC team I've ever seen is the Joe Burrow LSU team that, I mean, literally had like eight good pros. Now, they didn't have as good a coaching, but I thought that was the most talented team I'd ever seen out of the SEC was the LSU Joe Burrow team. And I thought the USC teams with Pete Carroll were all-time stuff. I thought there were a couple of Miami Hurricane teams that I thought were all-time stuff. I didn't think the Clemson teams were all-time stuff, or most of Saban's. I do think the Spurs historically were underrated because I think Manu Ginobili is the best sixth man in league history. You had Tony Parker was a perennial all-star running the show. Tim Duncan was the great fundamental and one of the great coaches. I always thought those teams were better. Bruce Bowen. They just had a lot of really smart, high IQ players in close games, but they never won back-to-back, so I didn't think they're one of the great teams. Shaq and Kobe, yes. I don't think the Miami Heat were. They were small. I mean, if you remember, it was like Joel Anthony, Udonis Haslem were their bigs. Chris Bosh was, pushed out to shoot, corner threes. So not every team dynasty is great. New England's most talented teams had Randy Moss, and they didn't win a Super Bowl. So when I look at New England's all-time teams, I think they're the best coached and quarterbacked. If the Chiefs won 3 in a row, where do we put them as an all-time great team? So I grew up with the Steelers in the 70s where there was no mobility. They had like 8 Hall of Famers. They were there forever. They had like a 3-year run. You couldn't score on them. There were some Raider teams, the Kenny Stabler Raider teams that were insane. That just, I mean, I can still name the players. I could go
had like 10 Hall of Famers, didn't they?
Yeah, it was insane. I remember them. It's just from the Art Shells and Villapianos and Matuzaks and Cliff Branch and Jim Otto and Dave Casper and shit, man. It was like every unit had a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
You don't get that. Now, I think the Niners and the Cowboys, their last, like those Bill Walsh, Joe Montana Niner teams were stacked. Jimmy Johnson, a couple of those Cowboy teams, those are different. I kind of put the Patriots in the New England, what's available with today's salary cap dynasty, which is best coach, best quarterback, arguably on the opposite side of the head coach, best coordinator, a little undervalued in terms of roster composition, tremendous circumstantially, tremendous in the red zone offense and defense. But I don't think the Chiefs, I think they're more entertaining than the Patriots. I don't consider this one of the great teams I've ever watched if they win a third.
Yeah, I mean, from a roster standpoint, they wouldn't. I mean, the team that I kind of grew up on was more Steve Young, but in '94, they signed Deion Sanders in the peak of his powers.
Yes.
And they somehow had a top 10 pick, and they drafted Bryant Young, who was the rookie of the year. So they added Deion Sanders, Bryant Young to Jerry Rice, Steve Young, Brent Jones. It was an unfair team. I mean, they had Ken Norton, Eric Davis. Like they were those individual 90s teams, roster, Cowboys and Niners. Even the Favre team with Favre in the peak of his powers with Reggie White. I mean, listen, what Andy's doing, he's going to go, if they win this, it's the greatest run, I think, I've seen in my life. I mean, This would be their 4th Super Bowl in 5 years or 6 years. They've won 3 in a row. I don't think that ever happens again. And I think we throw that out a lot. Never going to happen again. Never going to happen again. Like, I don't think that's ever happening again if he wins this game. I mean, it's insane that he's even got to this point. I mean, last year he was an underdog twice on the road at Buffalo and Lamar, 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and beat them both. And then the Niner team, who was awesome. Last year is like a defining moment for the era, I think, winning those 3 straight games. Buffalo, Baltimore, and the 49ers. Like, he wins this game, that's awesome. It was more impressive what they did. Last year was kind of, to me, the icing on the cake, and everything is just kind of cherries and sprinkles on top since. Like, last year was an all-timer. The 98 Bulls, who they literally did a documentary for, like when you watch highlights of Michael moving around, you're like, Google or YouTube 1991 Michael running around. It's not even close, but you get more credit because you have the buildup. Tiger Woods won the U.S. Open in 2008 with a torn ACL and a broken leg. Like, that wasn't the best version of him, but that adds to kind of the legend of sports, right? Michael Jordan, Tom Brady coming back from 28-3. Right? Like you said, the teams were much more explosive. Now, it is a team game. right? So in '07 and in 2011, you could argue those teams were more explosive, but their team wasn't as good as some of the latter years with the Edelmans, the McCourtys, the Hightowers, the Gronks. That's what I would say about this Chiefs team. They are a complete unit. They're not the sexiest. They don't have Jerry Rice running out. They don't have, McDuffie's a good player. No one's going to confuse him with, Deion Sanders or Darrelle Revis, but they are a championship unit. And
Yeah.
I think they've become kind of what Alabama's teams, not all of them were the same, but if you were going to beat them in a big game, you better bring your A game because they had just the championship mojo, the championship medal. I just can't bet. Like this Eagles team is loaded. I mean, if Jalen just plays okay, which if you put Patrick Mahomes on this Eagles team, I think the Eagles be favored by like a touchdown.
Right? I think I would take Philadelphia to blow them out. There's some numbers on Jalen Hurts. Sorry to interrupt this great video, but please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you. Now back to the video. And this is another reason I like Kansas City. When Jalen Hurts doesn't face pressure, he's a top 5 quarterback in the league. When he does, he's like 30th. So when you get him to be pressured, well, Spags, from the second, third, and fourth quarters, it's top 10, top 5, top 6 pressures in the league. So the key to the game is, can Spags create pressure on Jalen Hurts?
Yeah.
If they can, they win the game because Jalen Hurts, and Greg Cosell's been saying this to me all year, the film doesn't lie. He's a pretty average pocket passer if you put pressure on him. He deteriorates very quickly.
AJ wasn't reading the book on the sideline randomly. I mean, he's trying not to snap.
Yeah. So in the end, I think it comes down to, if I know what Kansas City's going to try to do. They'll bring some surprises offensively and special teams. They're going to try to put pressure on Jalen Hurts. Meanwhile, Philadelphia can't. If you bring any sort of blitz package on Mahomes, he'll eat you alive. So you just have to hope you win one-on-one battles, which they're certainly capable of, but they do have rookie corners in big spots. I think Andy probably looks at Philadelphia's secondary and thinks, boy, these guys are talented, and boy, these guys are really young. And I mean, that to me is Kansas City's game plan. Attack the young corners, make them earn their pay, give them, multiple sets, throw things at them they have not seen at practice and catch them off guard.
I think the one thing is that the Eagles, when healthy, have the best offensive line in the league.
Yes.
I mean, Lane Johnson's Hall of Famer. Mailata is one of the greatest 7th-round Australian stories in the history of the league. But, in that NFC Championship game, what happened? They had 2 centers. I mean, one guy's a guard who had to bump to center who are injured. One has a back and one has a knee. Now, I would imagine they're both going to try to play. I would say it's a 50-50 chance. One of them you're in the trenches against Chris Jones. What if all of a sudden Cam Jurgens' back tightens up or Landon Dickerson's knee feels a little weird? That could get weird fast, and all of a sudden you got a domino effect inside, and then Spags just attacks. But the Eagles, when healthy, are equipped just with the size and how talented they are, and Goddard, who's a really all-around good tight end, to, in theory, handle it. But Jalen is you just never know what you're going to get. You saw Washington, which he had best game of the season. Washington's not very good on defense. I mean, So it's just look at him against Green Bay, who was a solid defense, right? And the other thing is the Chiefs, I have a hard time seeing Saquon bust a couple 40, 50-yard runs against them. They're the best tackling team in the league. Like all 11 other guys, most teams, they're front 7 tackles, right? They're D-line linebackers. All the Chiefs DBs hit. All of them. This is what the Niners have had over the Kyle Shanahan era. When your corners and your safeties all tackle like linebackers, you're pretty hard to play. Because while I'm not decapitating you, John Lynch style, 1996, I'm still hitting you really, really hard. And that's what the Chiefs do a really good job of. So to me, there's a physicality element, and that's in the post-Tyreek Hill era. Because remember, when they beat the 49ers, their defense, Spags just got there. The defense was kind of in question. It has become, it's a new school defense because we don't play like we once did. But in terms of physicality, they are easily one of the more physical teams in the league. And to me, it's like, Saquon, you're not doing anything on us. Jalen beat us. And in theory, he should be able to beat him because he has A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I mean, the 2 guys make $200 million. But the Chiefs probably feel pretty good that McDuffie can at least handle one of them, right, and just keep him in front of them. And then it's can the other guy make a lot of big plays. And Goddard. The Chiefs have been a little susceptible over the middle of the field because, I mean, you're just going to have some openings in the defense. And Goddard is we don't talk about him like we do the Kelseys, the Kittles. Like he's pretty damn good. So I
Yep.
mean, I'd look for Goddard. If you tell me the Eagles win, I think it's less likely that Saquon goes for like 150 yards. I think it's more likely like I can see Dallas Goddard having 120 yards and a couple
Yep.
touchdowns.
Yeah, Goddard and the McBride from Arizona are the two tight ends in the league that get overshadowed, that are just fantastic players. They are wildly productive and they're very good in big spots, big third downs and big spots.